Welcome to the Weekly Whiff podcast. I'm joined, as always, by my good friend and partner in crime, 28 posts later, also known as Shaun in the
Yep,
darker
that's me.
corners of the internet.
The darker
And
corners
I
of
am
dark
here.
web.
I'm Pete. I'm the. I don't even know what my position is. This. I am the
Peasant King.
peasant king of the Weekly Whiff. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. This has been a bit of a gap in our episodes of late. Obviously, there's been a number
Yeah.
of things that have been going down
Bit of a delay.
since then. Yeah, a bit of a delay. You know.
I've been moving, so that kind of caused it. I was originally
Yeah.
going to upload one more episode before the break, but then my internet went out at my old place, and I didn't really want to use my data to upload an episode. So
That's entirely fair, dude.
yeah, just don't expect a schedule of us.
No, I mean, like, at this point,
upload.
like, if you're expecting a schedule from the Weekly Whiff, you are in trouble. But
yeah, we're both
yeah, no,
constantly in existence and constantly not in existence.
exactly right. We're phasing in and out, dude, between realities on the regular.
Between boys.
Yes, right. So, how you been, man? How's your week been? Tell me a story. How's your month? Whatever the hell it's been, however
Let
long.
me get my fucking sticky notes up because I had to write down the main things I wanted to talk about.
It's gonna be a saga, an epic.
Yeah, the recap for this week might be a bit longer for me than it normally is because there's a lot to talk about. So in the last episode we talked about movies we're excited for next year.
Oh yeah.
I watched two of those films. I watched Scream and I watched Belle. And I'll start with Scream. I thought Scream was really good, honestly. I thought it was
The new one.
the new one. I thought it was a
Okay.
really, really good movie. I see a lot of fans are kind of mixed on that. Some love it, some hate it. I'm definitely more of the love crowd. I also rewatched all of them leading up to it, and
Like a proper fan.
I'd say the new one is my second favorite in the franchise. I would
Wow.
honestly say it's like the second best one. The second film's a bit messy, and I think a lot of people normally say that's the second best, but I think it's a bit slow, kind of boring in places, but has some really funny moments to it and some kind of funny commentary on the genre. I think this film has a lot of interesting kind of commentary on the kind of requel reboot kind of thing, and it's
Oh, it's
not
great.
so much. It's not so much a commentary on like the horror kind of aspect. I think it's a good commentary on all of it, and it also kind of talks about like toxic communities, which is kind of funny with Scream. And it's kind of funny because a lot of the negative reaction was completely called out in this movie, which is kind of even
Amazing.
more humorous to me.
Yeah.
But I think it's a really entertaining film. I think all of the cast involved give it their all. They're all fantastic. Except the main lead actress is a bit weak, but I think I can still tolerate her acting. And there's some really funny characters in it. Me and my friend when we were watching it, we were laughing like basically the whole movie. It was a really funny movie. They really nailed the comedy, but it was also a really good kind of suspenseful film. And yeah, I was very impressed with it. I figured it could go like either I'd really love it or I'd really hate it. And I was curious to see what they do with it and if they had an idea. And I think they did. After watching, I was like, yeah, they knew what they were doing and they made the right call. I think it's a good movie and it's like worthy of like the kind of original praise that the original movie got. Although I do think the original movie is obviously better, but it's hard to kind of beat that for me. But it's a really good film. I would heavily recommend that if anyone's like a horror fan and has watched the original and wasn't sure if they wanted to see it at this point because it's been out for ages. I think it's like almost out of cinemas now, if not. But yeah, I really enjoyed that a lot. I thought that was a very, very entertaining film and had a very fun night watching it, even though I locked myself out of the house that night and had to like hire a locksmith.
Wow.
Yeah, that was not the highlight of the night for sure. You lost like a few hundred there. That was alright there. And then I also watched Belle, which is Mamoru Hosoda's new film, which is the director of Wolf Children, which is
Oh,
a
yep.
film I love. Um, and I thought it was also a really solid film. I have a few problems with it here and there, but I think it's kind of an interesting expansion on his earlier film Summer Wars, where it's kind of the same setting.
Okay. Is there normally a lot of continuity between his films, or
It's
is
not
this?
really the continuity. It's just like it's a similar setting. It's not the same setting as in they're set in the same world. It's
Oh,
like
okay.
different. I think it's a different world, like entirely. But there is a similar setting of it kind of being focused on like this virtual reality kind of system, like VR chat almost thing that kind of takes over the world and people start using it for everything. Summer Wars becomes kind of a more like save the world, kind of save like your hometown kind of adventure thing. Where I think it kind of loses me a bit in the last third or something because it starts losing its more kind of personal stakes.
Mm.
But this movie is a lot more personal. There's no really high stakes. It's kind of always just more personal and down to earth with the characters kind of like more personal lives being at risk than anything. But I think it's a really interesting kind of like look at a character that's grief struck and is trying to reconnect with her passion for singing in the virtual world. and there's a lot I love about it, but there is a lot that I kind of wish they went further in. Especially like I kind of wish there was more focus on the main character's relationship with her dad, especially since the director is very good at handling familial relationships in his movies. So I was a bit sad that he didn't try and focus on that a bit. But it's a very visually beautiful movie. Would recommend it if you want to see the kind of cool visuals in it, because I think it's definitely his most beautiful film. And the music in it is great. I've been listening to the soundtrack a lot recently. And yeah, it's a really good film. I'd give it an 8 out of 10. I think, because there are a few things that hold it back. It gets a bit too kind of melodramatic at points, and also it kind of handles serious topics in a bit of a comical way, in my opinion. Like, or where it kind of makes the people that are bad kind of too goofy and villainous. And I kind of wouldn't have minded if it was a bit more grounded in reality. But what was there is still enjoyable, and I liked it a lot. I would also give Scream an 8 out of 10 as well, for a reference for anyone, because I didn't mention that.
Damn. All right.
Yeah, I'd recommend both those films. Really good. I haven't watched any other films that I mentioned. I think I haven't gone through and checked, but I'll probably, when I'm editing it this week, I'll probably be like, "Fuck, I should have mentioned this or something." But I'm pretty sure those are the only two movies I mentioned. I'm gonna be seeing Jujutsu Kaisen Zero in the next few weeks, but
Oh, that's coming out, isn't it? Fuck.
yeah, came out real fast. I was really happy. For us, but yeah, I'll probably be seeing it in the next few weeks. I'm gonna see it with my brother and one of my friends, because we all really want to see it, and I'm very keen for that. Still very keen for it. I've heard nothing but good things, and I'll probably be talking about that in the next episode. Honestly,
I'm hyper excited to see it, but unfortunately, I do not live in a town that screens anime movies. So,
at least season 2 got announced. I'm pretty sure for
yeah, I
Jujutsu
did.
Kaisen. Yeah,
I'm pretty sure it's
that'll
for
be good.
next year, 2023. I
Yes,
think.
yeah. I
Yes.
figured it would be next year, but
Since the last episode we did, man, I've actually like been keeping up on the manga. So
oh really? We'll be able to talk about that in a second, because I'm still going
yeah,
through my weekly
no,
recap.
it's all
But
good, dude.
I'd be
I'm just
happy to
letting you
hear
know.
you talk about manga. Yeah. Because I don't want to drag my section on for too long. I'll briefly go over a few other things I've seen. Street Fighter 6 got announced. Don't know if you heard about that,
I
Pete.
did.
Yeah. That was the biggest shit show ever. Like, them announcing that. They released like a timer, like a countdown timer on their website a week before it happened, and the countdown timer only had like days and hours. It didn't have like what minute or second, like how many minutes or seconds it would be. And immediately when I saw that, I was like, that's kind of concerning, because when they get to the final hour, we're not going to know if it's like starting at when the timer goes to zero, or if there's another hour after the zero, like it should be. And as I expected, when the final day came, everyone was ranting when it was in the final hour, because they thought it was meant to start when the timer hit zero, but there was still an extra hour, because that's how fucking timers work. Um, and then they revealed Street Fighter 6 like half an hour before the timer stopped. Apparently, like, me and my friend were like on the timer website waiting for it to count down to see what they were going to announce, and then he was like, "Oh, Street Fighter 6 is on Twitter, and if you refresh the page, it's like now Street Fighter website." And it was like still like 5 minutes left for my timer, and I was like, "All right, what a shit show." Um, So that was funny, like watching all of that happen. There's not much to say about the teaser, because it's just kind of Ryu, and one of the new characters from Five, who I think is an older character as well. So I don't want to say new character in case Street Fighter fans get mad at me. But they released a Capcom fighting collection as well, which is what I'm kind of more keen on, because it has a bunch of their old fighting games on it. Like, I think Street Fighter 2's on there, has all the Darkstalkers games. Oh, not all of them, but has a bunch of them on there, and I've wanted to check them out for a while. So that comes out in July, and that's kind of what I was more like, whoa, that's really cool, and good job, Capcom. But as usual, Capcom are a bunch of fuckheads, and they completely butchered that countdown thing. But it is cool that 6 got announced. I'm keen to see more about it, but with that leak suggesting that they're going to release 3 versions of it within 3 years, I don't think all of us should be too excited about what's to come. Just be cautiously optimistic, I'd say. Yeah, and that's basically all the info I've seen recently. Besides that, I've been playing a bunch of hack and slash games in my spare time, and that's really all it. Yeah, that's basically been my weekly recap.
Fair enough. Yeah, dude. And then that in between moving houses has been a lot
Yeah,
going on, I
exactly. There's been a
assume.
lot
Yeah.
going on. Yeah.
Uh,
Thankfully, like yeah, like I said, I've been playing a bunch of hack and slash games in between it to keep my sanity, but
Fair
that's
enough.
about it.
Yeah, that's good, man. It's really good. I've had a bit of a ride myself. So I read I mentioned this thing a while back, but I read my first manga, which was like end to end, which was Chainsaw Man.
Yeah.
And
Have we
then
talked about it on the pod yet?
I don't think so. Maybe I did mention it
It might have
briefly.
been right after the last episode, actually.
I think so because we were
It's been
talking
a
about.
while.
Yeah, you lined me up with a lot of like recommendations. I remember that,
Yes.
and then I actually went through. So I read Chainsaw Man, which is like the first manga I've ever sort of read back to back, and I was incredibly impressed with it.
Yeah.
And then I went through and read Jujutsu Kaisen after that, which was just amazing.
Yeah.
And then I went around and watched um Megalo Box. So Megalo Box
Yep.
one seasons 1 and 2. And I sort of got back down into the anime rabbit hole. So like I said before, I think with me it's I won't touch it for like sometimes a year or and a half or
Mhm.
something, and then I just go get stuck back into it where I'm completely caught up in the whole thing.
Yeah, all you need is one weeb friend to be like, "Watch this shit," and then
Yeah. And then you're done. You're just like,
you're
cool.
done,
I'm not sleeping for the next however long.
yeah.
Yeah, next 3 nights I'm just going to be busy watching this shit. No, it was those were really good, and so we'll probably discuss those in a bit. And I think the other thing that I started watching was Konosuba.
Oh, really?
I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
So I was sort of
Fucking hilarious.
talking about it, and because a mate of mine has been trying to get a couple mates of mine actually been trying to get me into Final Fantasy 14, and they said that there's this character in there's a class in Final Fantasy 14, which actually is a lot like Megaman from Konosuba. And I was like, okay, what's this? What's this Konosuba shit? It sounds kind of funny. And I watched like the first 4 or 5 episodes of it. I think it was the first 4. And I was very impressed. I was very, very impressed with it. It was just really, really
Very,
funny
very
and
funny.
really fun. I love it. It's really good. So that's been all of that. Aside from that, I've just been rewatching a whole bunch of old movies. And I got like halfway through the first Punisher film last night, which is great. And what else? Oh, there's a whole bunch of stuff. I think what was another one that I went through recently? Oh, it was like a classic. Oh no, watching a new Mortal Kombat movie.
Oh, really?
Oh my god, dude, that movie is amazing. It is god awful. It's
Oh, you
so
said it's
fucking
god
bad.
awful?
Oh, yeah,
I thought
it's so good though. Like
Yeah.
it's one of those movies where you just watch it and like you would fucking
Better
love
than
it.
Arcane?
No, definitely not better than that. But it was, dude, it was incredible. Like, it was just so fucking bad. I
Yeah.
just remember watching it going like someone legitimately dropped millions of dollars to make this movie happen, and it's
It's fucking worse.
like it amazes me because the opening of it is like it is incredible to a degree, and then it's sort of it's like a flashback sequence, and then it just goes into the rest of the movie, and you're just watching it going, man, I don't know what the fuck's going on in this movie, but there is one saving grace, and his name is Kano, and he's this Australian mercenary character, and he is just eating the scenery the entire movie. Like he's having such a good time, but he's actually Australian. You can definitely tell he's a proper Aussie. Like he's just such a bogan.
Nice.
He's screaming. He's pretty racist. It's just great. He's one of those like hate things that you do, but like you just watch it and you're just like, oh, this is so good. I'm so glad that this guy exists in this entire movie. The effects are terrible. You have like characters look into the barrel of the fucking camera and say shit like flawless victory, unironically. It's dude, you gotta watch it just for the meme potential. It's on
Jeez.
Netflix. It's dude, you watch that, you're
sounds
just like, I
insane.
don't even fucking know what I'm watching.
There's been a lot of video game movies lately, it feels
Oh,
like.
dude, it's like we were talking about. You know,
Yeah.
the sort of Hollywood's gone around to making video game movies as opposed to the other way around. I haven't seen Uncharted or anything.
I haven't. I don't
I haven't
think
been
I
to any
want
movies in ages, man. One movie I'm still pretty keen to see is the new Batman film with Robert Pattinson.
I do want to see that. I'm trying to find like someone to watch it with because
Yeah.
a big trip to go to the cinemas for me right now.
Yeah, nah. It's all a bit sort of still white and tight here in Australia. But
Yeah.
for the most part, dude, and I've been playing an absolute shit ton of Valheim. I got back into Valheim. I went down to Sydney recently to pick up all my shit. And I went to Fraser
Nice.
Island, so I got the furthest off the Australian coast to ever have before, which is really cool. And yeah, that's sort of been my couple of weeks, man. It's been a wild ride. But in
Nice.
terms of media, yeah, I've just been sort of cruising with it. But yeah, Valheim. I've been playing nonstop Valheim like for the last 3 weeks. I can't stop. It's fucked. And I might talk about that later too.
I do want to mention as well. I have started playing Final Fantasy 14. Not fully yet because I've been sidetracked by a bunch of games, but one of my friends have gotten me into it. So maybe that can be a discussion later on when I'm high enough into it, and if you end up caving in as well.
I'm getting close, dude, because like I have the thing downloaded, and then I looked at it,
Yeah.
and then this is 74 gigabytes of data that I need to
Yeah,
download to
I
play
have it
the
on my
base game.
PS5, and I'm playing like the free trial because people keep telling me that like there's enough in the free trial that I'll be able to gauge if I want to play it like
Oh
properly.
yeah, no, apparently it's like the base game and then a one expansion or something. It's insane.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, I'm checking it out. I finally caved in because friends convinced me. Got like
Yeah,
friends saying it's the best MMO they've ever played. So I was like, fine, I'll check it out. I'll give it a chance.
yeah, no,
Yeah,
that's
but
entirely fair.
it sounds like a lot of the stuff that you consumed is stuff that we could easily talk about later on as well. Because
100%, man.
yeah,
Yeah,
but I'm glad that you've been reading manga. You finally graduated as a weeb.
yeah.
You're now an elitist weeb that can complain about the Chainsaw Man anime when it comes out and how it's not true to the stylistic spirit of the manga.
I'm such a fucking shitter, dude, that I like one of my genuinely favorite things about Jujutsu Kaisen is like the little author's notes at the end of each chapter early on.
Yeah,
Like these little just like little side notes
I
and like these little things that he draws
I
up.
think there
It's
is
so good.
genuinely a chance that if I wanted to, we could talk about that whole Shibuya arc in one episode alone because I
Oh god.
cannot stress enough how much I fucking love that arc.
Mm.
Just
We
start
could.
to end, it's so good. But
Yeah.
we can't we can't
No,
get sidetracked
we're
by
on.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. We can't do that now.
It's
Okay,
just a
so
foreshadowing possible.
yeah, there you
In
go.
terms of things that you have watched, though, I'd be very keen to do a Megalo Box discussion with
Okay, let's
you.
do that. Yeah,
Yeah.
Megalo Box is amazing.
So I'll Google quickly where it came out. I'm pretty sure it was like 20. Was
Is
it
it 14?
2018? Or was it that old?
The
No
first
way.
one, I don't know. Maybe I'm
2018. Yeah,
wrong.
season one
20,
was
last,
2018,
okay, gotcha. And the last
and
one was
then
last year.
yeah, the last
Yeah,
one was last year.
yeah.
We'll start off talking about the kind of season one a bit because I do want to talk about them as a whole, but I also want to kind of praise season one for its own merits because they're two very distinct, like they're different tonally entirely.
I
Like
would agree. Yeah,
when Pete finished season one, he was like, "Oh, Shaun, should I go straight into season two or watch something else since I don't want to get tired of of the series or something?" I was like, "They're completely different tonally. You'll be fine to go straight into season two. It's like a different
yeah.
vibe entirely."
And I'm glad I did too because I think that they like the sequel aspect
Yeah,
of it is
yeah. I rewatched like
great.
season one right before season two came out, and I was glad I
Yeah,
did as well. But for season one, um, Megalo Box is a kind of to start off, I'll mention that it's a bit of an anniversary project for an old school manga called Ashita no Joe, and it's a boxing manga. It's one of the classics, considered the best up there with Hajime no Ippo. It's from what I've seen of the manga and anime, I think it's really good, but I haven't watched all of it or read all of it.
mm,
And you can see the inspirations here and there, like Ashita no Joe, like obviously the main character of that is called Joe, and then that's why there's that little kind of fanfare moment in the first season where Joe calls himself Joe because it's kind of meant to be like a oh reference, but it's also kind of a cool, like sweet moment for the series. But yeah, so it's an anniversary project. I think it does a good job of kind of being an anniversary project for that classic series, but also being its distinct kind of own thing because it is very much its own thing. There's really no there's similarities between Ashton no Joe and Megalo Box, like some character designs are similar, some kind of character positions in the story are similar as well. But for the most part, Megalo Box is its own thing. And what it is it's like this kind of I don't know what the setting is, like what I could describe it as, but it's like
sort
this
of
kind
like
of
post it's not post apocalypse.
yeah,
It's like
it's
just
like
sort of mechanized future type stuff. It's
yeah,
got
yeah,
a pretty
yeah. But
heavy
it's not like
dystopian.
cyberpunk, steampunk.
No, it's sort of it's got these dystopian sort
Yeah,
of vibe
dystopian is
about
probably
it
the best way.
because it's not like
Um,
the technology level isn't to the point where you've got like you've got mechanized arms that can read people's movements and they can beat like shit out of each other with. But and I suppose there is like in the second season they do have that brain chip and stuff like that.
yeah, yeah.
So it is like I would almost call
It
it
is
sort
like
of pre cyberpunk, like it's
yeah,
getting
it's like on
towards
the
cyberpunk.
verge of being it. It's like in the
Yeah,
dystopian age before it, where it's just like a complete wasteland. But it's yeah, so it's set like that. It's about boxing with metal robot arms. So obviously, it's like Pete would love this, and
yeah,
the main kind of point is that the main character is like going through a tournament, but he's not using any robot arms to get through it, and he's
yeah,
using it all skill. It's kind of just kind of it kind of becomes this interesting commentary on like the original boxing versus like the new kind in a way with that.
yeah.
But before we talk too much about the story, I think the biggest draw for me is the aesthetic style of this series. Like just like there's a lot I love in the series, and I think I'd say the characters are what win me over the most. But
Mm,
there is just such a pleasing aesthetic to this series, and they I don't want to talk too much about this because I don't remember it entirely, but I'm pretty sure they went through this whole process to kind of emulate that old school anime look
Okay.
where they I can't remember how they did it, but they actually went through this process of kind of giving it this kind of filter and flair, animating it in a certain way so that it looks like some of your old 90s animes. And I think it captures that vibe perfectly, honestly. It looks old school, but it also looks incredible at points. Like
Yes.
it's got this perfect mix of like old school but new school. I would say
Old
it's
school
honestly one
aesthetic
of
with modern animation. Yeah.
yeah, I would say it's one of the most pleasing like animations I've seen, like in its own way. It is so just every frame is like pleasing to watch, in my opinion. And combine that with the amazing soundtrack in the first season, specifically because their soundtracks are kind of different between seasons. But
Mm.
yeah, it's got this kind of like hip hop kind of rap kind of vibe to it, and I think it's incredible. I think the soundtrack is so fucking good in the first season.
Yeah. Right.
um, it's so just every there's so much style to every scene added to it, and just like this energy and kind of personality put forth by it, and it's incredible. It adds so much to the experience, just like the aesthetic that they're going for.
Yeah,
Did
and
you
just
have
as
much?
like a, oh yeah, no, I'm just as a side note, like getting a little bit more meta about it. It is sort of your it sort of has a lot in common with your classic sort of boxing movies, insofar as it's like Rocky, from nobody to Nightman type business. Like, comes up from the ground, no one knows who the hell he is.
Yeah,
He's an underground fighter that throws fights for money, and then he
yeah.
wants to get into the big time. And then he finally gets the ability to do so, and they
Hmm.
go like really hard, all the way up to like the penultimate fight of the first season where he's fighting on the world stage.
Mm.
Um, so that's like this is sort of classic structure of the whole thing. But so it isn't like you look at you when you're watching it, you're not sort of going, I haven't, I've never seen something like this before.
Yes.
It does follow the pattern of your classic sort of. I'm not sure what it's like in Japan, but like your classic sort of Western Rocky style boxing story.
Even in terms of like Japanese manga, it's kind of like a fairly generic in a way story for like what
Mm.
I've read in manga. Like as I was watching it, there was really no kind of suspense on where the story was going. It was kind of clear.
Yeah,
I do think there are some kind of darker moments where it does things differently than what other some kind of manga does. Ashita no Joe is a bit dark as well, so I want to like say not compared to that. But there are like because Megalo Box starts off with the kind of vibe that the darker set will be is about kind of throwing matches and kind of gangs and that. But there's a
yeah.
lot of like war trauma like thrown in as well at points.
Hmm.
Kind of there's like I always find the episodes of Yuri at the end like intense where he's like kind of recovering from like taking off the metal arms and he's
Yeah,
like recovering from like drugs and all that and like screaming out in pain as he's like in this cabin in the woods. There's a lot of like very kind of like darker subtext here and there that the second season ends up building off of, but and it's I don't know how I describe it because I don't I love season one, and as I was watching it, I thought it was like incredible, like it was, but at the same time, it's not something unique. Like it's unique in the way it's presented, is how I would describe it, and how like it kind of holds itself. But
mm.
realistically, if you get down to it, it's not like a unique kind of grounded, like groundbreaking story or something. But it is a great
It's a great
underdog
box.
story
It's
told
a great,
really
yeah.
well.
It's
Yeah.
just it is the classic trope of the underdog. Goes up to the top
Hmm.
to fight the
Yeah.
best in the world.
And Joe's
Um,
just an incredibly likable character as well. Like he's easy to just root for, in my opinion. Like
hundred
very,
percent. Yeah, he's got that kind of like he does have skill and talent and potential, obviously, and like
yeah,
is not necessarily a prodigy, but obviously very very freaking good at what he does. And that makes him pretty easy because like when you contrast him with who he's up against a lot of the time, it's just that
yeah,
classic. You're a junkyard dog. You don't because he calls himself like junk dog or something or.
yeah.
Yeah, that's what
Junk
they
dog,
call
yeah,
him.
not dead
Yeah,
yet.
yeah, pretty much.
Yeah,
Um, and so all that, yeah, it makes him very easy to root for. I think the
yeah,
villains are very well, like the villains in and of themselves aren't necessarily the villains either. That's what's super interesting about this whole thing,
yeah,
in
yeah.
that it's not the classic. They don't go the classic route of, our bad guy is like the dude in the ring is a straight up like kills people like in boxing
There are
matches,
definitely some like
or
opponents that are kind of like
the
just
pieces of
like
shit.
villainous,
Yeah,
like just
hundred
pieces of
percent.
shit. But
Yeah.
there are some really good villains with like interesting depth to them as well.
Yeah, man, absolutely. And I think that's like obviously very much the case with Yuri. And even the
Yes,
woman who handles him and calls him like her loyal dog or whatever, she's got some depth and some interest to her as well.
yes. All the
I just find,
main
yeah, sorry.
reoccurring characters, I think they put a lot of depth towards. Even like the I always forget his name, but the brother of like the woman who is like a piece of shit at the start. I think kind of
He
I
has his
always
own
end up
arc,
coming
yeah.
around on him like by the end and kind of feeling compelled by him.
Yeah, so his
Um,
whole thing is that he can, what does it do? It reads
yeah, he makes like
movements
a
of
suit
other
that
people.
reads like the moves of the other people, which at
Yeah.
that point it's like, well, how is this even fair? But
It's
obviously it
completely
kind of
busted,
ties.
dude. It's aimbot. He's
Yeah,
got aimbot on his
yeah, he's got
robot boxing
aimbot,
arms.
but it ties
Like,
into the whole idea, like obviously like like new versus old when it comes to boxing. It's like kind of got this good contrast of like Joe's boxing compared to everyone else's.
yeah, so and just as an important thing, they call him Gearless Joe. So the name of the boxing arms are called gears. So
Yes.
they have sophisticated prosthetic style technology that can it's like basically like an exosuit for your arms,
Hmm.
out of Halo or some shit, and they use it to punch each other in the face.
Yeah,
Which
and
asks me,
like
I have a lot of world building questions to ask, like why is this what you're doing with this kind of
yeah,
technology?
it's
But
kind of funny.
it's
It's like the most
fine.
advanced thing in the world that you see, like really,
Yeah,
and it's just
100%.
used to punch each other.
Yeah, just he's just to punch another guy in the head, and
Yeah,
it was like another one was like the way that the rules are sort of like a bit. The rules are like sort of classic boxing, but it's unlimited rounds instead of
yes, yeah,
having an
yeah,
actual
yeah,
thing. And like you just sort of wonder, there's already enough issues with boxers going through brain trauma, with
yeah, and this just
unpowered.
enhances it.
Yeah,
Like
this is
getting
just
hit by a
like
metal arm.
yeah, you got a guy who's hitting you like 3 times as hard as he has any
Yeah,
right to be, and there's no like head protection or anything.
yeah.
Just
That's the whole thing of
wailing
like
on him.
Joe as well. He's taught to like avoid punches because like because he has no gears, he'll just get fucked up
Yeah, so
immediately.
that's the really interesting contrast about him as well. It makes it even easier to root for because you like
Yes,
he's doing the classic. I'm going to do this under my own steam, and I'm not
and
going to cheat using your crap.
it starts off as a thing they do because they can't afford a gear as well,
Yeah,
which
hundred
is
percent.
pretty
And then
cool.
it sort of becomes this whole shtick, and it's
Yeah,
weird because it like ultimate limitations of the human body versus like a dude with metal arms that can go a lot faster and harder than you and
yeah,
isn't working as hard because the arms actually do half the work. And that's another thing that actually bleeds back into why it's so likable is because he purposely fights at a disadvantage, and you just absolutely want to see him come over like out on
yeah.
top, especially when his opponent's a piece of shit.
I do want to mention as well a moment that I continuously praise as being the most I've ever fanboyed in any series ever. But towards the end, there's a point where Joe is made to wear a gear because he's fighting a fixed fight at the end of the tournament, and there is this fantastic part of the episode where the gear starts to fall off and the main theme kicks in as it, like pans around him standing up and like actually going back to gearless Joe, and it's
Yeah.
fucking incredible. I remember like actually like cheering
Yeah.
when I watched it the first time. I was like, yeah,
Get after it, son. Yeah.
yeah, it's so good.
Mm.
There's so many cool moments. There's like an end of episode bit as well where like a character asks him who we should be betting on, which is fucking like just so fucking cool. There's so many cool moments in that series, and
Yeah.
I love it. It's so cool is the way I describe it.
Mm.
It's
And this
endlessly
is all the
cool.
first season.
Yes.
Like it's this is all just a classic underdog story.
Yeah,
And
and
it's
it
pushing
builds up
forward.
to a good finale, in my opinion, where Yuri's decision to go gearless makes sense, in my opinion, by the end, because
100%. Yeah.
it feels like a respect thing. And that's what I love about that final fight. It's not about the fight, it's more about those two respecting each other and having like their moment together after
Mm.
after what's been built up for so long. And I know a lot of people kind of mixed on not seeing the conclusion of the fight, but I kind of like that it's reduced to just like a end screen that says
Yeah.
Jerry won because it
With
feels
like
more
a
like
sequel.
yeah, it feels more like a that was all it
Epilogue. The
was.
epilogue is really good.
It
Yeah.
wasn't about who wins. It was just about like them getting the fight and the winner or loser of the fight doesn't matter. And I'm glad because I remember the whole series. Everyone was like, "Is Joe gonna die at the end of this series?" And I was always like, "I don't want him to."
Yeah.
And I think the biggest thing to talk about with season one for me is that when season one ended, I was very adamant on I didn't want a sequel. I was
Yep.
completely fine with that, and I was like, "There's no need for a sequel. It's perfect on its own."
That was
So
my
when the
thought
sequel,
process too. As I was like,
yeah.
there's a second series of this, man, but I don't
So
know
when
if
the
I want to.
sequel got announced, I was like, "Ugh, I don't really want to see this or anything. It kind of seems unnecessary, and I think like there's nothing you can really add to what the show was." But then the sequel comes out, and it actually surpasses the original season for me personally. Like
Yeah.
I actually think Megalo Box Nomad is a masterpiece. It is phenomenal. Like
Mm.
I was watching it week by week, and I was like, "How is this so good? This is such a great sequel. Like this shouldn't it be this good? This is
Yeah.
one of the few times where I'm watching a sequel that I didn't want, and I'm like, holy shit! this is fucking incredible.
Yeah. 100%. So the
And
thing with the second season is it's a lot more psychological in tone. It's actually a lot
yes,
more character
from
driven
the
than it is about the
fucking
boxing.
start, and from the
Yeah.
very first like minute of that episode, it's just a complete like tone change. It's so much more darker and serious. It's like
Mm.
Joe's like addicted to drugs. He's like just
An
walking
alcoholic.
around, like
Yeah.
going around doing solo matches underground again.
Yeah.
Like it's like it leaves all these mysteries of like, oh, what happened to everyone? You get these glimpses because you see the coach kind of talking to him in like what seem to be like like hallucinations.
Yeah.
And it's so like just the first episode is such a great start to that series in my opinion. Like it just sets up everything so well for the tone change that you're about to experience. And yeah, Nomad's way more about kind of Joe's fall from grace, but also kind of his recovery and trying to redeem himself after something that you don't know to happen, but you learn more about it throughout the series. And
Yeah.
I would say that Nomad kind of does a good job of bringing up the problems with the kind of sport, like
I was
all
going to get into that. Yeah.
yeah. It kind of talks about the more kind of psychological, physical problems that happen. There's some really, I think the characters in Nomad are somehow better than like the original. Like the new characters introduced, I ended up caring about so much by the end, especially Max. I was that was like the heart and soul of like the series by the end. Like my love for like Max and Joe like together, and the Nomad's like split into kind of two parts essentially, where the first bit of it is focused on Joe on his own. He's with a it's Mexican, right? Like I'm not imagining it's a Mexican boxer.
I think yeah, or South American definitely.
South America, yeah. I don't want to
Yeah.
get the nationalities wrong, but he's with a box. I can't. It was what was his name? I've
I have
forgotten it for
no
some
idea,
reason.
dude.
Let me Google that real quickly because I want
Yeah.
to because he's kind of important.
Chief.
Was it Chief? Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was Chief or not, or if I was getting that wrong. Yeah, okay, it is Chief. Yeah. Yeah, he's this big kind of boxer Joe meets. Who I think the idea is that like Joe beats him in an underground ring in a ground fight, and he believes that Chief let him win or something. I'm pretty sure is how it starts in like the first episode, and then for the first four or so episodes, he's kind of with Chief and training him and kind of preparing him for a fight where he can basically get enough money to buy the land that he and many like friends like his
Yeah, so he's
friend
got a
community and whatnot.
family and a whole like community from South America trying to settle in
Yeah,
Japan, and it's
and
pretty rough.
those
Yeah.
early episodes are beautiful, in my
Mhm.
opinion. There's such good character building for Joe. You learn about this kind of trauma and this like guilt that he feels for like basically implied that he got like Coach killed or like did something that like where like Coach ended up dying because of something he did, and then Sachio hates him, and it's this incredible character building. There's some beautiful moments in that, and also like to mention it as well. Season one's kind of got a bit more of a like rap hip hop kind of aesthetic of its music. This is way more kind of
Flamenco South American
yeah.
style, like fingerstyle guitar, and
And
I would
I said I
happily
love
say,
season one,
yeah,
like soundtrack, but season two soundtrack is better. It's
I,
just
I I would actually don't much care for the Japanese hip hop aspect of the first one, but the second one's really cool
yeah.
thematically.
I definitely like the hip hop kind of aesthetic, but I
Mm.
think that the second one's like it's just there's too much to it. It's objectively better.
Yeah,
Like, but
it has
it
its own sort of
yeah,
character.
and it really matches the tone of the second season. Like it
Mm.
really fits with it, and it's such a there's so many scenes that just have beautiful like soundtracks going through it. There's like a scene where Joe's like kind of going through withdrawals from like drugs because he's trying to better himself so that he could like help Chief better.
Mm.
And he's like in the like RV and he's talking to like the hallucination of like his coach, and it's just a beautiful scene. Like the light kind of shines in while the music's like fucking going on.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Really, really, yeah. These first few episodes are like really good kind of character building of like what Joe's been through, and also kind of setting up Chief as a really likable character as well. And with what little time you get with him, he's incredibly likable and all that.
Mm.
It stunned me that they managed to make a character that was so doomed to die, like into such a compelling character, in my opinion.
Yeah,
Because
100%. Also, like thematically, you feel his touch the whole way through the second season
yes, yeah,
as well.
exactly, and that's kind of symbolizing him giving him the gear, that or like him getting that gear passed on from Chief that
Mm.
he ends up using towards the end, which yeah, I love those first few episodes, but I think the rest of that season is really good as well. And after Chief wins his fight and gets the money, he ends up dying because of injuries from the match and that, and he passes away like smiling in like his car. It's very very tragic scene. I remember when I was watching it because I was watching with a friend, and we were just sitting there the whole time, like, Chief's gonna die. Chief's absolutely gonna die. And then I think he was like, he said something like, I don't want to sleep or something. And me and my friend just looked at each other and we were like, oh god, it's
Yeah.
happening. Like, there's no way this episode doesn't end with him fucking dead in his car or something.
Yeah.
And it's really good because it sets up Joe's character and it makes him willing to return and kind of redeem himself, which he does do in the second half. And the second half's a bit like, it's in the setting of the first one, but it's still very like tonally consistent with the first half of the second season. It's much more darker. It's kind of more somber, reflective, kind of focusing on how the characters have grown during the time and how a lot of them were better off without Joe around, or like learned to be better off without him. And it's a good kind of contrast to the first season because everyone loves Joe in the first season. They're all rooting for him. But in the second season, basically everyone starts off hating him. Like, they want him to leave. They don't want him back. A lot of them are like, yeah, why'd you come back? You should have just stayed gone. We're better off without you. And it focuses kind of mostly on his relationship with Sachio, who we didn't mention in the first season, but Sachio is kind of their,
He's a kid genius,
yeah,
inventor style kid who's really good with boxing
yeah.
and all the
He
rest of it.
grows like
Who's
close to
yeah,
Coach and Joe like during the first
he's sort of one
season.
of just cornerman type thing. Yeah,
Yeah,
he's
yeah,
like the plucky little kid. And
yeah.
in the second season, he's a lot more edgy and like he's trying to pick up boxing and do all his own things. And he's just kind of he's a real piece of shit, really. But also
He's a piece of
understandably
shit, but like
traumatized. Yeah,
understandably a
you know,
piece of
you
shit.
get
Like,
why. But like
yeah.
he's just it's past a certain point. Yeah, no, look, it's all about forgiveness and redemption. And I think what's really cool, I was just thinking about this, is that in the first season, it's a lot about getting out of like coming up. You know, it's
Mhm.
coming up through the ranks and coming up through the through the world and really establishing yourself as somebody. Um, and like leaving home essentially and going out into the world and finding a place. And in the second season, it's a lot more about coming home. It's about coming back
Yes.
to familiarity, coming back to family, and like yeah, just reconnecting with people. And I think that's one of the things that really resonated with me is because Joe sort of had a family on the way up. You know, he had the coach and he had the kid and he had all those like younger kids who were following around everywhere. And it was like sort of junkyard boxing and all the rest, and he's doing it all under his own steam. But like it's him understanding how to do it, like that he needs help and that he needs to sort of he needs his team there to help with the strategies for beating these different people. And that's one of the biggest things. Like that was a huge, and it's funny because it's done like pretty obviously, but it's also subtle enough that when you start off the second season, you really, really feel their absence. You really
Yeah.
feel like this isn't Joe. We're looking at like calls himself Nomad, and it's almost they've got a beard and everything, and you kind of just go shit. This is a completely different dude now.
Mm.
And then the rest of the season. So instead of just going like we can really focus back down on the whole scrapyard thing, or we can stay down here in sort of dumps. And it's also interesting in that the whole season isn't about Joe reclaiming his old glory, and it's not about him
Yes.
trying to go back to being like the number one champion in the world. He's still a legend. Everyone thinks he's still a fucking legend.
Mhm.
And they're like teasing comebacks and stuff. Like it's huge.
Yeah, that second half, like, I think me and my friend were like, oh, is it gonna be like him kind of like fighting in a like tournament and getting back to like glory or something? But I was glad that they focused more on him just kind of doing his own thing, trying to set up the gym again that like him and the coach had at the end of season one,
Yeah,
and it being more focused on him trying to fix his relationships with everyone that he's kind of ruined. And then on the side, there's like a kind of tournament thing happening to determine who's like the best, and it ends up being like a tournament to determine who will fight Joe in like a comeback kind of like extreme match. And the two characters that it's mainly going on are Max and Liu, I think is the other one's name.
yeah,
And Liu is like Yuri's apprentice, and Max is like this kind of new kind of character. They call him like I can't remember what they call him. They call him something like really intense, like, and the kind of point with him is that he like goes nuts in matches, and it's kind of all about this chip that they've installed in his brain, which gets really fucked up because it's kind of implied that they're just like they're all not implied. They basically state that they're just letting it do what it does, and it's meant to kind of enhance his performance because he was left like comatose after an accident as a firefighter. I believe that's what it was, right? He was a firefighter, right?
yeah.
No, he wasn't a
He was a
firefighter.
cop.
He went into he was a cop and he went in to save someone. And then like got injured and couldn't move. And then the chip lets him move, but it also like really fucks him up. Like he's got a lot of like mental shit going on there where he's like scaring his kids and his wife because he's just occasionally like kind of just like losing it and like snapping and becoming just this really weird kind of almost dog-like in some ways, where he's like just eating with his like food with his hands and like breaking plates or something.
He's mentally regressing to a child.
Yeah. It's like it's really fucking dark. And he loses it in a match and like almost kills a guy, like kills Liu in like their match, and kind of there's like 2/3 of that series in my opinion. There's like the first third, which is about Chief and Joe, and kind of Joe's like um coming to acceptance of like his guilt, or like the guilt that he feels and wanting to come back and redeem himself. The second third's kind of focused on him and like all the characters and kind of like him redeeming himself and trying to patch up friendships. Then the final bit of that show is kind of about Joe and Max, in my opinion. And it's about like their match and building up to it. And what I love about that is that it's kind of because for the whole season, I think I was worried that Joe was going to die, and I wasn't sure what direction they'd go in. And the final few episodes are kind of about how both Joe and Max have things that they need to live for, but they both still wanted to really do the fight. That they still really want to fight each other because it's kind of like Max's dream to fight him. Joe wants to fight him.
Mac Rosario, Mac time is what they call him.
Yeah, Mac time. That's it. Yeah. That's what they call like him, like kind of fucking like snapping, or like the chip kind of like something the chip does. And there's this real piece of shit scientist working on him, like as like throughout the whole thing. And he's very villainous, like just an asshole. You absolutely hate him. He like eats popcorn during the matches. Just a real fucking smug, like son of a bitch.
Yeah, corporate tap dancing lunatic, like that classic young entrepreneur sort of style.
And it's good growth for Yuri's old like trainer, who like the female, like in season 1, because you see like how she's grown and like how she like kind of hates his approach to it and all that. And she's become like a bit more of a, Yukiko, I remember her name. And what I love about the Mac and Joe plotline is that it builds up that both of them have things that they need to live for. Like Mac has his family that he wants to look after. He just wants to like look. He wants his son to see what he looks like in the ring, like as a champion. I think is the kind of main point. And I think Joe just kind of wants to like fight him so that he can he can give him that like moment, or like that kind of fighting moment. And for the whole like as it's building up to that, you get this kind of looming dread that like one of them's going to die, like because there's this whole kind of idea of like the Nomad and like the what animal is it? I always forget its name.
Hummingbird,
yes. It's like this allusion to the story of like the Nomad and the Hummingbird, and how like it like leads them on, like it leads the Nomad along or whatever, and kind of alludes to like one of them dying. You can't really tell who's who, but you get the idea that Joe's the Hummingbird because he's got the Hummingbird gear that Chief left him, and it really builds up to it. Then in the final episode, I was so happy that neither of them ended up dying, because it would have ruined it for me if it built up to all of this. Because Joe's whole point was learning to not go for these dangerous fights and kind of like accepting that like he didn't need to fight or something, or like that he didn't need to push himself to the brink anymore, because that's kind of initially what got Coach killed, or not what got Coach killed, but it's what made him miss Coach's death. And that's like the biggest hint of regret, like the biggest regret that he has for it was that he wasn't there for him, and that he kept training to do a match so that he could win money for Coach's recovery. And it kind of ties into season 1, where he's got this kind of champion mindset where he can keep going. He's like, oh, so long as I win, or so long as I train and fight and win, everything will be fine. But by the time the match starts, Coach is like already dead. Like it ends up being for nothing. And then Joe basically loses it all. And it's kind of, and that's the whole point of like Joe's arc, is like accepting in that, forgiving himself for that, and also kind of, and it feels like by the end the character arc should be not doing it again. So if he'd gone into that final match and lost and died, I would have been so disappointed in the series. And it's the same with Mac as well. I would have been just so disappointed if like either of them died. So I was glad that they went the direction that neither of them died. And I think having Joe just tap out is a good decision. It really highlights that growth. I know some people aren't satisfied with that fight, but I think that the decision to just tap out, throw the towel in, and just give up shows his growth and shows that he understands that it's not what's important. They got their fight. They got Mac got his moment, and they fought to do their best. But at a certain point, Joe was done, and he needed to tap out because he had a lot to live for. It wasn't for him to die there.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's great.
It is.
It's
the whole arc. Yeah. That's all. It's all fine, man. But that is the whole arc of the thing. And I think when you were talking about it, it taps into a lot of really serious shit that happens in like the boxing world. and it's not normally sort of seen. Like most, I don't know this because I don't watch boxing anime, but I would assume like there's a lot of that whole sports anime style thing. It's like tournament arcs and training montages and sort of going all the way up to the top. I don't think a lot of them deal with the aftermath of like brain damage and addiction to painkillers or any of the number of things.
Yeah,
Maybe they don't. Maybe they do. I don't know.
it depends because Washington and Joe is a lot more darker and does kind of cover those topics. So that's kind of why I
Okay.
think Megalo Box felt encouraged to cover them as well. From what I can
Yeah.
understand, they covered it in a very different way though. Like there's a lot of different approaches.
Mm.
And Hajime April, which is the other main one, does cover some kind of darker aspects here and there as well. But it is way more kind of sports shonen-y than
Yeah.
like Megalo Box and Washington and Joe are.
And just to your point earlier when you were talking about how Joe he adjusts his fighting style and puts on cheap sold gear, which is designed to be a lot more defensive, sorry, than offensive. The whole thing is it's like it's out of the love for the sport and love of the game rather than out of personal sort of glory, and that's the huge chunk of what it is. So and this is a funny thing is again the end seems kind of anticlimactic. You're like, well, nobody wins, but you're like, if you've been following what's happening in season 2, you understand that Joe's been building to a point where he can actually say no to the spotlight and to victory constantly and consistently. And so when he finally Sachio throws in the towel because Sachio gets like final say on what happens. It actually feels really wholesome and really a good sort of, it feels very cathartic because you understand
I was going to say cathartic,
Joe's managed to throw off his need to constantly prove himself and win, and also Mac managed to not go completely fucking berserk in the in the fight, and he got his sort of level-headed, even like sort of one-on-one fight with Joe, which is sort of an echo from the end of the first season where Yuri boxes against Joe like fairly and evenly without gear. I mean, this one they both wear gear, but it's still like it feels like it's just even-tempered kind of shot for shot. Yeah. But it subverts the classic "I'm going to knock you down and then win the fight" type thing.
Joe wearing that gear like just shows it the most as well. Like it's not about the kind of the aesthetic, like the name, kind of like reclaiming his title. It's definitely just like the respect and love for the sport.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's really cool. That like there is, it's obvious that the writer of this whole thing knows his boxing, understands a lot about like even the culture in and around it, and what sort of it's a pretty good look into what some of the fighters might have to go through, and it's actually pretty well represented in terms of like, there's always this thing that happens. In combat sports, especially, of like people who are in their prime and then they win and they become world champion, and they just get consistent win after win after win after win after win, and they're sort of on top of the world, and they retire, to enjoy their millions of freaking dollars or whatever, and then they want to have a comeback, and it's that whole psychological need to get back into the zone and do what they were doing before. It's like Mike Tyson, I would argue Conor McGregor, a lot of these like massive big name fighters who've been household legends for the last 10 years. Wanting to sort of step back in and get back into the fighting game again. Tyson's been around for a lot longer than that. Sorry, not like 10. I'm thinking more of McGregor. But yeah, they just want to get back in. They just want to prove that they've still got it and they've still got the same juice they had when they were younger. And what Nomad does, especially the second season, it shows that like it doesn't matter. Like what you did is enough. What you managed to win. Like you won a world championship. Even once, that's an enormous accomplishment. So being able to like just be at peace with that, to understand that you're never gonna always be that guy. It is to learn to live with the consequences of what happens and to grow up with who you are. Like grow up with what you've done being enough and being able to look into more important things. And this is like something that's also mirrored between Mac and Joe as well, is that they both have families that they really need to freaking look after. Like Mac's got a little kid. And there's a whole thing with that in the company that he's sort of got the chip from, so he's not a paraplegic. And Joe, Joe's got to rebuild the gym and look after all the old sort of people and train up the next sort of generation of boxers. And so there's actually a really nice parallel between them of like, hey, you know what, family and human relationships are more important than this kind of pursuit of old glory that I may or may not have had. And that's like one of the things that leads to Joe falling into the underground ring again, is that need to constantly push himself. But then, like, he overcomes that, and then in a reflection of that, in the end of Nomad, he ultimately triumphs and walks away from that need for recognition and to prove that he is always he's still the same guy that he used to be. And that's what really does it for me, man. That's one of the things that really drills it home for me. And that's why I like it so much.
Yes,
it's just that whole character arc of boxers understanding what's actually important about life. Like punching people in the head and doing it with skill, talent, and speed is amazing. But at the end of the day, you're still a human being. You're not a machine. And I think that's one of the reasons why gear are in there too, because like if you were going to get sort of deep dive into analysis, gears are used as a representation of like these people are machines, like they're like fighting machines. It's a whole idea of boxes being weapons, or their arms being weapons, or whatever, their hands being like lethal weapons. So then when you account for that, it's like the people who use, that's why Joe in season 1 is so important, is that he's all man, no machine. He doesn't have anything. He's just got himself. And that's what makes him so interesting and unique and awesome. And in the second season, Mac is like a cyborg, basically. He's got a chip in his brain that allows him to walk around and do stuff. And he's more machine than man to a degree. And it's mentally regressing him into like an animalistic child type thing. And so then him being able to overcome that and actually just embrace the more, like he's mostly, like he can't walk around with that chip in his head, but he's actually be able to go back to being human and be with his family. And that's super sick too. So I think like thematically the whole thing ties up really nicely. It's an amazing set of character arcs. If they make a sequel to this, I'm going to be pretty upset though. I think they need to leave it there.
I said when me and my friend finished watching it, because we were watching it as it came week by week, but we're like, all right, yeah, now that's a perfect ending. They can't do it again. They can't like make another sequel and then somehow
they might do it. They might even do it better again, man. You never know.
If
like
they did,
Sachio would.
I just have to. I'd be so stunned because I'm not sure what they could do next. They'd probably make it a movie, if anything. That's like the new approach to everything. Like make a movie or something.
I mean, I would Sachio doing things. That's a possibility.
Well,
like
because at the end, it kind of leans towards him going for a more like kind of like making kind of inventing kind of approach with like them driving him, like him leaving and going.
He leaves on the bike though with the gear on the back.
I guess. Yeah, I did interpret it more as like kind of just being him getting the gear as a kind of more gift or something. Not that he would use it, because that would feel a bit weird for Sachio's thing, because he ended up kind of getting away from fighting after like all the underground fighting he was doing himself. But yeah, like who knows? I'm perfectly fine with it being ending here, because
same, 100%.
Yeah, this was that ending scene is like beautiful. Him at like the crossroads with like Sachio is like very, very touching.
And he's driving back, and he's got Chief, like he's got the old coach sitting in the back with a beer. That's really good.
It's a really good.
It's perfect.
I need to stress it again, because I wish we could have I could have talked about this in the sequel episode, because I cannot think of another series where the odds were so against it for a sequel, and I ended up loving it so much. It is such an incredible sequel. It builds off of the old series. It adds new kind of stuff to it, explores it from a new angle. It's a perfect sequel, in my opinion. I cannot think of a sequel that I respect and love more than this. It is such a fantastic sequel that was not necessary, but changed so much about what I loved about the original series. And like, it was incredible. Watching it week by week was absolutely incredible. I was just stunned at how great it was, and I was always annoyed that it was so like not talked about. But the original series as itself was already kind of underrated, and no one talked about it much. So going into the second season, obviously there weren't enough fans coming over from the first season to watch it. In some ways, I would say it was like my anime of the year. It was such a good series. I really enjoyed the season a lot. And if you somehow listened to all this and haven't watched it, but still want to watch it, I'd say watch it, because it's still a great experience regardless.
100%, yeah.
It's fantastic.
If you like boxing and you like anime, then watch like both. And even if you just like, I would argue, I'm not a massive like boxing nut. I don't follow a lot of like real serious boxing or anything. I'm more of an MMA guy, but I think that it's still incredible. Just for love of the sport. Like if you like dudes with robot arms punching on, there's plenty of that. But there's also enough character and story and themes and like.
That's the thing. Even if you don't like boxing,
substance to carry
enjoy it a lot.
100%.
There's a lot of good character building in this, and the boxing matches aren't ever really too big either. Like they're not like the majority of the episode most of the time. There are some episodes where it's mostly focused on the boxing, but it is always a bit more of the character building, and then having cool kind of animated fight sequences here and there. So I think there's a lot there for everyone, really. If you like boxing, check it out. If you don't like boxing but like really good characters and storytelling, check it out. If you like the more kind of old school 90s anime, check it out as well, because it's got that aesthetic down, like nailed down.
Yeah, 100%.
Or just listen to the soundtrack on YouTube.
Do that too. Actually, one other thing I just realized about the entire series, dude, there's no romantic arc in it at all.
Yeah, there really isn't. Yeah, I was kind of worried that that's what they do with Yukiko, like towards like at some point or something, but even then, it's not really focused at all. She's kind of just there's no romance arc. It's way more just focused on
which is pretty rare for something like this.
Yeah, it is. Quite
so yeah, this is interesting. Just interesting something. I just realized I was like, oh, hang on, there's no romance in this.
Yeah, I think of like all the other anime I loved that year, last year as well. Like pretty much most of them had romance arcs in it as well. So it's always in there for some reason, but not this one.
Well,
It's just Drew's
like
love for boxing.
yeah, no, that's right, and that's the whole thing. It's like it's a love affair with the sport rather than the
Yeah.
some person. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
No, but dude, Megalo Box is amazing. I can't
I'm glad you
can't
enjoyed
thank you
it.
enough for actually getting me onto it because I really had a great time with that, and it made me sort of sit back and as always, like I'm a softie, so I sit back and sort of appreciate things like family, appreciate things like connections with other human beings, and how a lot of the time you might fuck something up, but you have the ability to be able to sort of reconnect, and you just have to be patient, and you just have to do you have to try and right your wrongs, so to speak.
Yes,
That's a huge part of what that
it's an
is.
incredible series that I loved enough with just the first season, but the second season adds so much more love to it for me, and I'm glad you enjoyed it. I hope some people may have checked it out or something. Maybe they saw all talking about it and decided to like check it out themselves because it's incredible anime. And we don't talk about anime too much, honestly.
No, we don't.
It's a bit
We'll get
rare.
into
Like
some
we'll talk about
discussion.
like watching it, so but we never have a really good proper discussion. I
Yeah.
imagine the next one will probably be Kaguya season 3 because that's coming out soon.
Oh, it's April.
I think it's like
March.
it's like
Hang on.
March or something. It's next season. Like so.
Okay. Shit.
Yeah, I'm so keen for
Oh,
that.
dude. Yeah, I have to get onto that one.
You said you have your own discussion for today that you wanted to
Oh
bring
yeah,
up.
no, I was this is like completely unrelated though. So thematically, I don't have
Yes.
that tied in. I was actually done because this I got spurred on this like ages ago. Well, ages, but like a couple of podcasts ago, we are talking about video games and indie studios and crafting sims a lot. Like the whole how basically you made the observation that everything's fucking Minecraft and there's no real getting around that.
Draw like build off of it essentially.
Yeah. And that just got me in the mood to play Valheim, which is a game that I don't know if I've talked about this on the pod before. I feel like I haven't, but
I think you've only briefly mentioned that, so you can go nuts.
yeah, it is like it's like Viking Minecraft basically. Without all the boxes, the blocky sort of aesthetic. A lot of it's how do I describe it? It's like it's got sort of PS2 era CD graphics to it. Yeah, like sort of 3D graphics from like a PS2 era. That's like a stylistic choice. It's made by an indie company called Iron Gate Studios. It's published by a bunch of guys called Coffee Stain, who are famous for Goat Simulator.
Oh,
yeah. They're from Sweden, so they're like quite familiar with the source material, and it's made by 5 people who are all university graduates. So it's like very, very, very fucking indie. It's as bad as indie as you can freaking get, which I love. So I would strongly recommend everyone play Valheim. I'll give you a bit of a teaser for why it's good in a few. But also just thematically, I've been thinking about this in terms of like, I've just realized that Minecraft is the best selling, like I was looking into it. Minecraft is the best selling video game on the planet. Nothing's ever even come close to how much money it has made. That was made by one guy in a basement.
Yeah, well, started like that. I don't even know if that guy's attached to it anymore now.
Nah, he sold it, dude. 100% he sold it. Yeah, that guy's like that guy's now a multi-billionaire.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and Microsoft owns Minecraft now, obviously. But back in the day, dude, like this is just coming back from that whole sort of thing where some of the best like video games ever in existence come out of indie studios, and Minecraft is the penultimate example of that, and it spawned like a huge, it's got a ripple effect that's going off everywhere. And when I look at stuff like that, and I wonder to myself, like, why the hell? First of all, why? Like, I know there was a whole bunch of clones and everything else, but like, Valheim for me is a realization of the same kind of vision. It is like about a gig to download. I think it sits at roughly, I could be wrong about this, roughly in and around 20 to 25 Australian dollars. It's less than a gig. It was around a gig to download, and it's a year old. It's only been out for a year. It came out in February 2nd, 2021. And it was released. It was like released in pre-alpha or alpha, I think, in 2018. But like it's now but what's that Steam term? Like constantly being updated, but not
early access.
No, it's not early access. It might be. What's that thing where it's just like they just keep adding updates to it and it's just there and it exists? I guess so, but it's like it's not alpha
I think
per
early
se.
access is
Yeah,
the kind of main thing.
But it's like anyone can get hold of it.
Apparently, my computer can run it on the minimum settings. I didn't think it would be able to, honestly. But
there you go. Yeah, it's fantastic, man. And so what this game does is I should just break it down a little bit more. Is it takes every single thing that I have found to be appealing in Minecraft and it adds 3D models, so it's not as blocking or whatever. It adds actual decent combat, a variety of weapons, and it really doubles down on a couple. It has bosses in it, like actual bosses that have impact upon gameplay, and it's randomly generated, so you get world seeds and stuff like that. There's 5 bosses, I think, at the moment in the game. talking
Okay.
about bringing out more. And each biome actually has its very distinct, unique feel and importance on actual gameplay loop. So, I'm just trying to, because I can get into details, but I feel like it's a bit too much all at once. Essentially, it goes through this idea that the further you get into the game, the more access to more options, crafting options, and weapons and armor and everything that you get. So in Minecraft, essentially the whole thing is like find diamonds as fast as possible, right? So you just go get some coal, and then you build yourself a thing, and then you go get some iron, and then you find some diamonds, and then you've got access to the best stuff you can get in the game, pushing aside all the enchanting bullshit. I know nothing about Minecraft really. I play some, but I know that diamonds like the best
There's
stuff you can
enchantment
get.
in Minecraft now, but yeah.
What, sorry?
There's enchanting in Minecraft. Like,
Yeah.
there has been for a while, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm saying I know that like makes your diamond weapons better,
yeah.
but I'm talking about in terms of materials, the base level you're always going to be the best at is diamond, and you can find that anywhere in the world if you dig deep enough. And it's not like it's incredibly challenging to do so; it's just time consuming. Valheim locks resources behind bosses, so bosses will drop you items that you have to then craft into things, which then give you access to more resources, better resources. So you are essentially stuck on a certain strata of tech. So you might just be like wood, stone, leather, for instance, to start with, just sort of Stone Age style stuff.
Yeah.
And then you kill the first boss, and it gives you access to its antlers, which lets you mine. And then so you go into the next biome, and when you can mine, you can get stuff like copper and tin, which allows you to make bronze. So you go up to the Bronze Age. And then after that, you kill the next bad guy. And so like each biome has its own boss and has its own distinct kind of like enemies and stuff. And they present a rising sort of graph of challenge. So in the meadows, it's not all that difficult in the first sort of section. In the second one, it gets a lot harder because there's a lot more enemies. You got trolls running around who just like literally deforest places. Like you normally have to cut trees and rocks down to like be able to pick them up, but you can actually kite a troll around and it will destroy half the forest for you instead of you having to actually swing. It's hilarious. And then you got like a bunch of little dudes called Grey Dwarves who run around and try and attack you in packs, all that kind of stuff. Anyway, so as you progressively go along, it gets harder and harder, and there's also a big focus on ships. So you have to like build a Viking longship. This is all Viking themed. Allegedly, the story is essentially just you're a forward Viking, and you're in Valheim, which is like the purgatory between there and Valhalla, and you have to like build your own base and then beat these bosses so you can go to Valhalla. It's a really, really cool concept. It's obviously done by people who are Swedish and Nordic, so they understand it. And it has so many little tweaks, and the game is so addictive to me because you constantly want to be pushing further. You constantly want to make your bases better because you get buffs for having a good base. You constantly want to have like more bases. You want to expand outwards. Like you want to continuously amass resources, and the game just like sort of slips you in like it's a drip. It's like an IV drip of just straight up addictive gameplay loops. And it just gives you just enough to keep everything going, and everything feels sequential. And every single time you get access to a new material, it gives you a whole bunch of different crafting options and actually make your life easier. The way that the health and the stamina works comes around food. So actually, food management is super important because if you don't have food, or your stamina and your health are at the lowest possible levels, the better food you craft give you like more health and more stamina. And you can't heal unless you've eaten something. So your base level hit points are 25 if you've got an empty stomach. But if you mix up different varieties of food, they give you like certain kinds of health and certain kinds of stamina. And so the more food, like the better food that you have access to, the harder you are to kill, and the more you can run around and do things. Because it's a stamina bar like in Dark Souls, so you need to be able to manage your stamina. And that comes down to everything from like cutting trees down to running to jumping to doing anything. Swimming as well.
Yeah.
So it's an absolutely incredible game, dude. It has such like ludicrous amounts of depths, but I think it gets around a huge chunk of the problems I might have with Minecraft insofar as if you know what you're doing, you can just go straight through it. With Valheim, if you know what you're doing, you can go straight through it too, but it's a lot easier.
It sounds like it's a bit more, it takes more from Terraria, honestly, than it does Minecraft.
Yeah.
So, like, whole kind of boss element and all that. What you said sounds pretty interesting, right? Like,
Yeah, it is 3D though. It is 3D, and it is so gorgeous. Like I said, it's 2D shaded, 3D PS2 style graphic models, and a lot of people are like, oh, that looks like shit. No, when you see the lighting in this game, if you look at screenshots of the lighting, and I'm talking,
yeah, I was just looking at screenshots, and I was like, there's no fucking way my computer can run this.
yeah, no, it does mean like the way the lighting and everything's done. It's just, this game is made by 5 people, and it's like $25 or some shit. I don't know how much it's worth now, but when I bought it was like 10.
Yeah.
And it's just insanely good, and it just makes me wonder, like, what is it? And this is sort of the larger point I'm pushing at. Is what is it about, like those crafting, base building sorts of games that really stick in people's heads? And more to the point, like, what are some examples where this is done really well, and when is crafting just, as we've talked about before, when is crafting just sort of superfluous and dumb and shouldn't be in the game?
I could say a lot about that.
Yeah.
But I think crafting games or like kind of survival crafting games, it works so well because it's that kind of advancement mentality. Like what's like fun about Minecraft, like or like what was fun about Minecraft, what was appealing to a lot of people, like though it's still fun nowadays, obviously because I'm playing it a lot lately. But it's that idea that there's like it gives you that kind of as you play. There's like when you get like certain materials, you see that there's they can get you higher materials, and so there's that kind of advancement loop of like you get new material, you can make new get gear that can now mine a new material and it keeps giving you forward. Once you've got the highest material, you can make a portal that brings you to the Nether, and then once you go to the Nether, you can get materials that bring you to the end, which brings you to like the Ender Dragon boss fight, and then there's some post game stuff you can do as well. But I think the loop kind of stops there, honestly. Like there's not much after the end that you can do, and it's that kind of advancement mentality that makes it kind of addictive, since you know what you can do next, and like you said, once you know what you do, you can run through it. It's the same with Terraria as well. Whenever I play Terraria, it's that kind of constant like getting advancement and getting new materials. So Terraria is a bit different because there's so much like variety to it in terms of like some worlds can spawn with specific like elements to it or something. I have a lot of respect and love for Terraria. I think I like Terraria a lot, and I think it gets a bit more hate than it deserves when it comes to like the Minecraft clone thing,
Yeah.
because its advancement loop is very different to Minecraft, but it's still there. And it sounds like what you're saying with Valheim as well. It's the same kind of thing where you beat a boss, you move on to the next biome, and then you can like.
There's something else I should add to the whole thing, which I think gets around a lot of it. Like you just said that Minecraft gets to a certain level, you beat all the bosses, and that's kind of it. And like
Yes.
mobs are random. What Terraria does? So what? I'm not sure how Terraria works. You have raids at nighttime and stuff in Terraria, I guess as well.
Yes,
But
you do. Yeah.
in Valheim, what happens is the game will scale based on, first of all, this game's multiplayer. I need to mention this. This is like you can get 10 people into a server, so it's fucking amazing. And I'd
Yeah.
love to play it with you sometime, man, because I've got my own little thing I'm working on at the moment. It's
I
super
would.
fun.
It sounds like a lot of fun, so I'm
Yeah.
definitely gonna look into it.
But like what they do is actually have like scale raids. So the more bosses you kill actually start spawning harder
Yeah.
enemies from other biomes into peaceful ones.
Mm-hmm.
And you have like entire raids where if you're the only person on the server, you'll just have an enormous chunk of like bad guys from a certain place that shouldn't be there, and they'll just come out of nowhere and start fucking your shit up. And that's terrifying. So you actually have to build your bases to be defensive because you don't know when there's going to be someone knocking at your door.
Yeah.
And I really, really like that a lot. And that's one of the
Yeah.
things that keeps the game dynamic and interesting. Because even if you beat, like, say, 3 or 4 bosses and you're working on the last one. Also, I just need to mention this. The biomes get really, really fucking hard. Like, it's the fifth... Plains is, like, the hardest one, I think, at the moment they've got in the game. And it is impossible to play. Like, it is... No, it's not impossible. It is incredibly difficult. Like, you need... The AI, the way the AI is, like, built in and around the goblins and shit. So there's these little guys called Fuelings. They look like tiny little laughing goblins with sticks. They look like any kind of cannon fodder in any other game.
Yeah.
Valheim's like, nah, fuck that. These guys one hit you.
Oh god.
And you're like, what? I've got a knee-high leprechaun with pointed ears coming at me. He's like sniggering. And he hits me with his stick once and I fucking die. And you're like, what? And they're like, yeah. Also, they always travel in like packs of 2 or 3 and they're literally programmed to flank you in packs so that when their berserker mates turn up, which are like half the size of trolls but way faster and create huge amounts of screen shake when they hit you, they can fuck you up. It's insane. Like the difficulty of it scales to such a degree where it's like, holy fuck, man, this is really, really hard to do. So that's another thing I would just add about Valheim. Sorry, want a bit of a rant there, but it actually continue. I know Terraria does this too. I think because when you
Terraria does do it. I was going
Yeah.
to say, yeah. Once you kill certain bosses,
Game
more
gets
enemies can
gets
spawn.
harder.
Like
Yeah.
once you beat the final boss of the game, like quote unquote, 'cause now like the final boss is way further than that final boss was. But it unlocks like a post game kind of stuff where you can get new boss fights, and then I think there's even like now a different layer of boss fights you can get as well. There's so much like there's a lot of content in Terraria. I have never fully beaten Terraria or like gone like and done everything that you possibly can in a world because there's a lot to do and it's a massive time sink. But I still enjoy it a lot. I think it's a great game, and I think the content is what there's a different vibe to when I'm playing Terraria and Minecraft. Where Minecraft, I'm kind of doing. I was talking to a friend about this because we play on the server, and the main reason why I'm playing it so much is because I do creative stuff on it. Like I just build stuff and kind of just have fun with the building in it. And I think that's where Minecraft really shines compared to some other games where the building's kind of pretty good and dynamic in a lot of ways, where there's a lot you can do with it. And Terraria's building is kind of a bit more superficial, like surface level, but there's a lot more kind of content and fun stuff to explore in Terraria, where you're constantly advancing and going through different biomes and exploring things. Terraria is crazy difficult as well. I remember when a friend and I used to play it years ago on our own, like kind of 2-player server. We would constantly be dying. Like we would just be laughing at each other because it would constantly be like, "Oh, blank has been killed by vines, or blank has like fell to their death escaping from blank, and it's like, and we're just constantly laughing because we were getting fucking asses kicked.
Yeah.
But then like advancing and being able to go through biomes just smoothly and not have any trouble at all was so satisfying because of it. And it sounds like Valheim has some similarities there in that regard. That's why I say
I would say it probably has a lot more in common with Terraria than
well,
it
yeah.
does with.
But obviously that Terraria is built off of Minecraft, so Valheim's kind of built off of Minecraft as well in that sense.
Yeah.
With it being 3D, it sounds like it's a lot more built on it. But from what I was looking at, it looks way more kind of fucking grand and epic than Minecraft does in some areas. It looks great.
100%.
I want
Yeah.
to see if my computer actually can run it, or if that thing was lying to me, because I think some of those screenshots looked really fucking good. But yeah, to come back to what I was saying before, I think it's that loop of advancement that makes it so addictive to everyone. That it's like because there's like you're doing well, as you're playing, you unlock like a new kind of layer of gear or something, and it lets you know that there's some more that you can do with that gear now. It kind of gives into this addictive mindset where you feel like you're constantly progressing. Yeah, I think that progressive loop is what makes it work.
100%. I think that that's one of the like biggest and best things about it, which is why it strikes me as odd that it's in a lot of like these bigger sort of open world games. I don't know, man. This is a working theory, but my feeling is that like
I was gonna say before you
Yeah.
go to that, if you did want to talk about like games where it does it well, like before we go on to like kind of the open world and like more modern approach, which in my opinion is kind of where games do it worse.
Yeah.
But if we're talking about games that do it well, I think if you include it in a survival game, Stardew has kind of aspects of that progression loop as well. And obviously, I think Stardew does that kind of crafting loop well, where you feel that constant advancement. And besides that, I can't think of too many because Terraria and Stardew are kind of my ideals when it comes to that. Kind of
There's another one called
mentality.
Starbound, I think, which is like Terraria. It's like,
Oh,
that was
yeah,
a
I
good
think
one.
I've heard of that. I never played it though, but
Mm.
so I can't comment too much on it. But
Yeah,
yeah, and it sounds like Valheim's pretty great too.
Yeah, man, 100%. I love it. I think I like it more than Minecraft. To be honest with you, that might be heresy here, but it's dude, it's so good.
I'll have to cut that out so you don't get killed. But,
Okay, that's fair. I think that's my personal opinion. Fuckers on the internet, fuck off. I think that there's a lot of okay. So when we're talking about like crafting survival games, I think that's a big aspect of a lot of different games across the board, right? So we'd be looking at anything from like Minecraft is an archetypal example, but a few moments later, just had a quick issue with Craig, so we're just gonna step off like nothing ever happened at all.
Yeah,
But
if
no,
we
my
repeat ourselves, sorry.
Yeah,
we don't
it's
know
fine.
what got cut out. Yeah.
So pretty much essential point. My point was like, so Valheim, Terraria, and Minecraft all have like crafting, survival, base building elements. My question sort of was trending more towards why there's so many open world AAA titles right now that sort of necessitate an entire crafting and survival thing. It's like survival light or it's like crafting light. It kind of don't really add anything to the whole experience and doesn't really make a lot of sense.
It's something I've noticed. I think I mentioned it recently, in the trends in gaming thing, where like a lot of AAA games are adapting it. I don't know if this got cut out or not, but I will repeat it because I do still think it's an important point. But I think The Last of Us borders on it, like when it comes to AAA games adapting crafting thing, because it's kind of like it makes sense that you have to craft materials because you're actually surviving and gathering materials, and it encourages exploration. But like at the same time, I'm kind of like it's always just kind of there for me. Even in the first one, I'm not just trashing the second game here, but like it is the first game as well, where like
and it's also linear, so it kind of
It's also it is very basic. Like it's kind of just make arrows or like make some med kits or something. It's just kind of weird. I don't love it.
I don't think you even make arrows. You just scrounge arrows up.
Yes, actually, yeah, I think you're right. I think you just make like grenades or something or some shit.
Or like slings to be able to carry more weapons. Or anything else. Like, it kind of makes sense. It does have a fitting place.
Kind of does make sense. I think it's just like it might be the second one more as well that I'm remembering it from, maybe. But like
that's where you make all the different kinds of arrowheads, and you got those silencers. You pick up all the oil tins and stuff like that. At a certain
point, it just starts to feel a bit like kind of tapped on just to be there for me. Is kind of
well, another thing that it does add a lot of to the game, and I think this is the difference between a game that actually has it as a core mechanic and something that sort of gets taxed in, is it does add to the length, the runtime, and the amount of time you spend playing the game. So I might, for instance, use a place where I don't understand why it's in there. I kind of get it, but it's like God of War, the new God of War game.
Oh yeah, it
has a lot of this.
Doesn't it?
You got to like go around and find all these different materials and you upgrade your weapons, and there's like the smiths and stuff in there, and it's got a story purpose, and it kind of makes sense. But it's like, again, I don't hate it being there. It's not like it feels out of place for me, but that's like one thing I've sort of noticed. And then
I
when
think
you
that's
get
a
to the
fair
point,
acknowledgement.
yeah, when you sort of start getting to the point where you're like, okay, Assassin's Creed has this now. You're like, okay, but what? Like, why?
Assassin's Creed has a lot of problems there, to be fair.
Yeah, no, fair. But I'm just saying something like Assassin's Creed. I know that
Yeah.
a lot of the Ghost Recon games, like the more recent ones, Wildlands, I think, or maybe it's just the newest one they have.
I'm just it. It's curious to me because I don't really get where it came from, like, or why it like happened. Because in survival games, obviously, it has its place. Like, it's a survival game. You're actually making materials, like, and
Everything's actively trying to kill you all the
yeah.
time, and it is randomly generated, so it kind of makes
But
sense for
like
it to be there.
for a triple A game that isn't focused on that survival aspect, it's always kind of odd to me when it's in there because it's like, do people like this enough they want it or something? Especially in like games like Assassin's Creed where it was never there. Games like The Last of Us, I guess it makes sense because you can argue that like Resident Evil has it as well because and they're kind of like survival horror founders.
Yeah,
So
God of
so much.
War. God of War is a weird nebulous one where I don't disagree, or I don't think it's like pointless
Well, it'd be
having it
like
there.
DMC 6 having like a crafting thing in it, and I
Yeah,
didn't think
why?
about that. Yeah, because like it's a kind of a different genre entirely at
I
that point.
haven't played any of
But
these
like, I
games.
guess, I
Yeah,
guess
but
God of War, like the new one, is meant to be kind of a departure from the old games in a lot of ways, so
mm,
it makes sense. Then I
yeah.
can't say about the God of War. I'm going to be playing through those games very soon, so maybe I'll be able to say more on it later in the future. But like, I can't say anything specific with God of War because I haven't got much experience with it. But I
That's
can
fair.
somewhat kind of vaguely understand what they were going for. But I do still think it's a good example of like tapped on crafting thing because that's the new trend.
Yeah, I mean, and another
And no
example
diss
we
to God
might
of War,
use.
obviously.
No, absolutely not. I think
Yeah.
another thing where it kind of like semi makes sense is that MMOs have a lot of this. So kill X amount
Yeah.
of things, get harvest X amount of parts, make craft stuff out of that. Like it adds to the grind of the whole game, but it
Yeah.
also means that you no longer have to spend actual money to get all that stuff yourself, and you can build it yourself. And the game sort of got a skeleton in place so that you can level up your crafting, level up X amount to be able to do that with the game, and that makes a lot of sense for that. I think it's not necessarily a terrible idea. And maybe to a degree, like a lot of RPGs, it sort of does make a bit more sense that that's in there because the game allows for it and accounts for it. But I'm sort of more tending towards like I've just noticed. I guess like yeah, I'd love to shit on Assassin's Creed, especially like the later installments. That's one that like this doesn't make sense to me. And then there's a lot of other games that sort of add it as an aspect, but it doesn't feel like it actually has a sort of proper place in the game. I haven't played any of the Horizon Zero Dawn or any of the new ones, but I assume it's all very similar. Go here, get this, pick this up, and craft this, do this, so you got better
Yeah,
weapons and stuff.
that's kind of one I always think about as well, but I'm afraid to talk badly about Horizon Zero Dawn because people internet gets mad at you when you do that. But
Don't be
I'm
afraid, dude. Just fucking send it. Go.
oh okay. I think the game's trash.
Yeah, that's fair. I've
I
never played it because everyone's like,
I
"Oh, it
didn't
looks
like
so good."
I didn't like the first game. I played the first game and was always kind of disappointed with its variety of like robot dinosaurs and all that. Like it felt kind of
Mm,
lame that like there was only really three types of riding dinosaurs and they were all similar. That's my main complaint with it. You can tell I'm really a 12-year-old at heart that I
yeah.
played the game and was like, there's no variety of robo dinos.
Have you played
But
Monster Hunter World?
I have not.
Okay.
One of my friends has been trying to get me into it for a long time though.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So I
with
hear that's like,
Horizon,
that's quite similar. Kill stuff, upgrade weapons, but the loop
I think you'd be
is
fair, yeah.
yeah. But I
Horizon
think
does have that loop though, like is what I was gonna
yeah,
say. There's so much like just grabbing materials, and I think that's when I was starting to get sick of it. Is like the main thing of Horizon as well, where I was
yeah.
noticing this popping up in games, and I was just kind of tired of it. Where I was kind of like, does this really need to be in the game? Like, is it adding that much to it that you need this in the game? Like, couldn't you make the game without this in it?
Yeah.
But yeah, like some people say it's the survival element and like it's meant to be the idea of like you surviving in that world, and I kind of get it, but at the same time, like I just think I don't like crafting that much in these kind of games. If I want to play a survival game, I'll play a survival game, like that's kind of meant to be built around that. If I want to play like an action dinosaur game, I kind of want to play an action dinosaur game.
Yeah, I think one of the things that sort of occurs to me as well is that how it's implemented is super important. So
Yes.
for instance, I detest grinding shit. Like Warframe's a really good example of this. If you're playing Warframe and you're doing like a whole bunch of stuff wherein you have to like run around and you have to kill certain amounts of enemies, you have to get certain amounts to be able to craft new upgrades and stuff. Again, makes sense. That's sort of a staple for most MMOs. But you do run into this section where you have an issue with, oh hey, like this is kind of tacked on, not part of it. But that it's a constant grind, and if you make the grind really unenjoyable or really irritating loop, where it's walk to said place, bend down, pick it up off the ground, and do all the rest, then it becomes really
Mhm.
frustrating. One of the things, like, say for
It
instance,
almost
which
becomes like some games as well. It almost just becomes a glorified currency, like crafting. Like
yeah,
get certain materials so that you can do this for ammo. Because I was just thinking that like with DMC, like obviously like there's no crafting in it, and if they were to put crafting in, I'd imagine it'd just be about like crafting materials so you can make weapons or something. When instead you can just buy them or something. And then I was like, wait, yeah, you just buy them. And then most currency, like most crafting systems in games, are just like get 10 of these materials and you can make this. And it's just like you could just replace it with a currency system at that point. Like
yeah,
and
and
just
that's
like
the
have
yeah.
and that's like kind of I think that might be another indicator of it as well. If like if it's just there just so that you have to get something to unlock something, at that point I think it's kind of like it just feels like an alternative to just having a currency system.
Even if we look at something like Bloodborne and Dark Souls, right? Like those
Hmm.
games both have a certain kind of aspect wherein you have to find upgrade materials and then craft new stuff. Like you have to go to a dude and you have to sell it and you, like they upgrade your
Yeah.
stuff for you, and that's resource gathering of a different kind. But I think it's got a lot to do with like how important or how tacked on is it as a whole.
Yes.
And how like yeah, so with the Souls games, for instance, you still just find stuff lying around and then you can upgrade said stuff, and you only have just enough to be able to really get like one or two good weapons, right? Like you're not going the whole way, you're not going so hard on it. It kind of encourages specificity
Yeah.
towards one certain thing.
I think it
Um,
does work for Bloodborne and Soulsborne games as well, is because like so long as you're exploring, you'll most likely find the stuff. And
yeah,
I
that's
think
right.
that's why I can tolerate in The Last of Us as well, because like you said, it encourages exploration and
Mm.
to like look around and all that. Though The Last of Us, I'll argue that it's a bit more because it's a bit more of a linear game and not as open world. It kind of works less
I
because
would say exactly the same thing about the Soulsborne games, man.
really,
Yeah, no, because it's linear.
I think there's
Those games are super linear. Like if you think
I
about it, it's
think
just
they're open enough that like it encourages
although
it with Bloodborne. Like I feel like
100%
with
they're open enough, but it's not like it's still pretty linear in that you go to said boss, smack said boss around, go up to the next boss, do the thing.
I don't think it's linear in the same way The Last of Us is
No,
because
no, no, no,
there's
not that
enough
linear.
like when you start Bloodborne, you can go multiple directions and all that, and like
Yeah,
it's like
100%.
sure there's like a path that you normally go on, but after a while it starts to deviate and you can start going in different directions. So that's kind of why I hesitate to call it linear in that regard because there's multiple ways to go about that, and I'm positive that the way I played through that game is very different to how some people played through it. But I get what you mean, but I just think it works better with Bloodborne because there is enough areas to explore and having like materials and that does encourage that.
Yeah,
Whereas with
100%.
Bloodborne shows so
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm not saying it's linear in the sense of
yeah,
it's bad, but it's not like Assassin's Creed Odyssey or something where you're just running halfway across the entire continent. And it's like all and that's the other thing too, I think, man, is that if the game feels massive, but it's also super empty and there's nothing to do,
that's
that's super frustrating. So like
yeah, I was about to say that. Like
a
that's
big chunk of
straight
like
up
yeah,
the same.
the games sort of bouncing in and around this. Some like I would argue a lot of like especially sort of Ubisoft titles. It's like you just go from place to place and there's all this gut stuff and you upgrade and you craft and you do all the
Yeah,
things and that's sort of how that works. But it feels like it's just padding. It feels like it's just we're making it purposely huge, so you have to spend so much time to get all the stuff that you want to do
yeah,
this.
that is a big problem I have with a
It's
lot of open world games.
yeah,
With
and especially even with crafting aspects. If crafting is not a core part of the whole game, then maybe you look into something more like currency, which makes a lot more sense for buying upgrades, which is how I think the old AC games used to go. Um,
yeah,
and I think like yeah, and DMC being DMC is very similar. Like you get enough currency and you buy upgrades. Like it's not hard.
yeah,
But yeah, I agree with you. Like if a crafting system just feels like something that could be literally fixed with a DMC style upgrade path of just buy it and then it works a lot better as opposed to
yeah.
like, hey, let's just make this massive world with all this stuff, and then yeah, you explore it. But if the whole world feels completely empty and useless, then why? Like, this
It's
is the
really
thing.
just a
Yeah,
matter of how you apply it.
yeah, I
Is
guess.
the main thing. Because like obviously, if you have a massive open world with crafting materials, but it's like a fun world to navigate. I mainly think of it Elden Ring here when I say that because that came out recently, and I've heard a lot of praise for that and friend
Yes.
groups and that. And from what I hear, it sounds like the world's very fun to explore in that game.
Mm.
Like there's a lot of different variety, like a variety of elements and bosses and like materials you can find. So obviously it can work in an open world game. But when you got some like, I feel like there was a game that came out last year in particular where I can say this, where like it's just a massive open world, but there's not much to it, and it just feels empty. It comes to a point where having so much starts to feel empty because there's just like not enough to do. Like or like there's like it's a big world, sure, but there's not much to do in it. So it just feels more empty than if it was a smaller world with like a lot with just the same amount to do.
Yeah,
And
I
you
I've
gotta
got
understand that.
yeah. I think so. Like I look at The Witcher 3, for instance, and that game's got the almost perfect blend of it because it has crafting elements in it, but most of the time you don't bother. Like you
Yeah.
can, so for instance, you can go and pick stuff out of the wild, which adds like a lot of really. You have to kill monsters to get like certain kinds of upgrade materials, and that's really cool because it actually encourages exploration and do everything else. Same token though, you can buy a lot of that as well.
Yeah.
So like you can just go ahead with the story missions and you do side quests and you can gather and stuff.
Yeah.
The world feels full enough that it's not like empty, but it because it's obviously random monster attacks and different things happen, but
I mean,
it
yeah, like
doesn't feel so restrictive or doesn't feel like you have to go and do it so badly that you can't just sort of kick back and
having just an
enjoy
extra thing
doing
can
all
be
the
good
rest.
as well. Like I
100%, yeah.
think most of the Tales of games have crafting in it, but I've never touched it once because I never need to. But it's there as an alternative in case you have the materials to make things.
Yeah, 100%. And again, like I say, MMOs are sort of an outlier in that, like that's one of the ways that they actually
Hmm.
pad it, because you can either try and buy the stuff or you can just go and
Well,
get
they're
it
designed
yourself.
for the grind mindset, to be fair as
That's
well.
right. Yeah,
Yeah,
the grind set.
the grind
Um,
set. Yeah,
yeah, so I think that's one of the things with that. But I'm starting to find it pretty disappointing when they bring out a new game and it's all like
I
this
agree.
massive open world. It's like the size of Europe, and you can run around and do everything. You're like, I don't care that
Yeah,
much.
I'd
Like,
I'd rather like a smaller world that's just kind of got enough content in it that it's fun. Like it doesn't need to
yeah,
be open world. I see a lot of people. Sorry, this is something that I keep seeing, and it makes me laugh every time. I see people saying that they want the next DMC game to be open world, and that makes me laugh every time. I'm just like, fuck off. Keep it to a mission statement or something, like 20 missions or whatever per game. Like open
yeah.
world, a game doesn't need to be open world. Like that's the main thing as well. Like there are some games where it works, obviously, and I'm all about it, but it's not like a necessity. It doesn't mean a good game. And if you have just smaller worlds or just levels like that are just more fun to navigate, then I think that's good.
I think also open world is in a lot of ways can be a shield to hide behind to say that hey,
Yes.
that because here's the thing: there's nothing worse than an open world game where the combat's incredibly unsatisfying.
Hmm.
Like if you've got to run around and you're getting ambushed by stuff and you got to collect all this gear and it's just like combat isn't fun,
Yes.
then that's the absolute worst because you're like,
I
well,
feel
now
like there was an open world game that came out last year that I hated, but I can't remember.
is it called Days Gone? The zombie
No, but I
survival
have
one?
been playing that, and I do think that game does kind of have that problem in some areas.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's just like you need a. That is a good example there of like pretty much everything we're saying. Like I played a little bit and I was a bit overwhelmed by all the crafting and all that stuff. That's another thing as well. It can just get overwhelming. Like
yeah,
when you have like all this crafting materials in it, and sometimes people put in too much. But it kind of ties into what we're saying of trends in gaming and also just like making games as a whole, where you gotta know, you gotta have a good balance and know when enough is enough. Like,
yeah.
and at a certain point, it's gonna just become overwhelming. And I hope that this kind of trend of survival elements in like non-survival games kind of dies off because it's getting a bit tiring. In my opinion,
Yep.
I just I'm over every game having a crafting equivalent or something. It might just be a personal thing for me, but like I just don't really care for it. It always annoys me. And I hope that every game being open world isn't a trend that kicks off majorly as well because there's still
Or
enough.
it already kind of has, but yeah.
I know, but there's still enough there that I'm kind of like still fine with it. But if like it gets to the point where like every game is just open world, I'm just gonna be disappointed because there's enough fun in linear games as well, like just mission based games
Yeah,
where you
it
just
gives you
progress through
yeah,
your levels.
and it gives you like that's the thing. Those games always have a better combat system.
Oh
That's the
yeah,
thing too. The
exactly.
combat's always more fun. So you like, well, DMC Fighter's depth comes from its combat system. It's not its
Hmm.
it's not necessarily like the world, the world building and stuff. It's like I'm here to kill demons. That's as simple as it gets. And it's the same with other stuff across the board. So yeah, no, I agree. I love a good open world, but good open worlds are sort of they stay good because they are good and because they're
Yeah,
massive and because they have depth
just
and variety to
make the
them.
game in a way that is beneficial for itself and not like in a way
Yeah.
to appeal to like the masses. Like
Yeah, just
that's really
tighten
all
it
it
up.
is.
Don't feel like you have to put everything in. Don't have like a
Mm,
full open spectrum game. It takes 300 hours to complete. That's just got nothing in it. Likewise,
yeah.
if it doesn't always need to be that freaking massive. Likewise, like an AC started off as an open world game across the board, so that's like I don't know, that's where it came from, and I get that. But like,
Yeah.
make the interactions more interesting. Give me more dialogue options. Give me more side quests that are actually interesting and well written. Like,
Yeah.
there's a bunch of ways you can approach that, and I think that it's kind of sad that it hasn't sort of. Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's you just focus on like doing one thing really well or doing a couple of things really well and getting the gameplay loop and giving the gameplay loop some depth and some variety and some interest. as opposed to just making it wide and shallow. Because if the game's shallow, you're just not going to want to play it, and you're like, I don't want to grind through this for the next 500 hours trying to finish everything off or get to the highest level of thing. If you want that kind of stuff, like go play an MMO, do it with other people, like some kick back and enjoy yourself. But yeah, man, that's about it from me this week, I reckon.
Yeah, no, I think we covered that pretty well.
All right, awesome, man.
right.
Well, we'll reconvene at a time. I'm sure it'll be convenient to both of us,
Hopefully
and
there'll be less of a gap in between episodes.
100%, dude. Yeah.
Like we said at the start, don't expect a schedule anymore.
There's no schedule. There's no schedule here. We're just
have no expectations. We're just two crazy guys that upload a video every now and then.
Every now and then that nobody listens to.
We got like
anyway,
loyal listeners.
Yeah, full loyal listeners. Well, here's to you guys, and thank you very much for listening. If you are listening, if you want to know more about what's going on in the world, especially in the world of horror, go check out Shaun's blog if you're still writing on that, and if not, wait for his YouTube channel. Yeah, wait for his YouTube channel to come out, which we will very heavily advertise and make a big deal out of when it actually appears.
Probably.
All right, cool. Thanks all very much for listening, and have a good one.
Bye.